The cardboard banner hanging crookedly above the break room door read, "Farewell, Marcus," in rainbow letters that had clearly been purchased at the dollar store. Balloons sagged from the ceiling tiles, and someone had brought a grocery store sheet cake with "Good luck" spelled out in blue frosting. The whole setup screamed, "Obligatory office goodbye party." But what struck me wasn't the half-hearted decorations. It was the barely concealed relief on my colleagues' faces. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. I stood in the doorway, watching my team of 5 years celebrate my departure with genuine enthusiasm. Sarah from accounting was already 3 cups deep into the cheap punch, laughing louder than I'd heard her laugh in months. Tom, my supposed work buddy who'd grabbed coffee with me every Tuesday for 3 years, was regaling a group with some story that had everyone in stitches. Even Janet, our perpetually serious project manager, had a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Marcus," called out Derek, our department head, approaching with arms spread wide like we were long-lost friends instead of colleagues who'd barely spoken outside of mandatory meetings for the past 6 months. "There's the man of the hour. How does it feel to be moving on to greener pastures?" Greener pastures. That's what they were calling it. That's what they'd all been calling it since the transfer announcement came down 2 weeks ago. As if being shipped off to the Phoenix branch office was some kind of promotion instead of corporate exile. It feels... I paused, watching their expectant faces. They wanted me to say it was exciting, that I was looking forward to the adventure, that this was exactly what I'd always wanted. It feels like exactly what I deserve. Derek clapped me on the shoulder, missing the edge in my voice entirely. "That's the spirit. You've earned this opportunity, Marcus. Really earned it." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had earned something all right. Just not what they thought. 6 months ago, I'd been their golden boy. The one they came to when deadlines were impossible and clients were breathing down their necks. I'd pulled this team through 3 major crises, including the Meridian account disaster that would have cost the company millions if I hadn't figured out the supply chain workaround. I'd worked 70-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, missed my nephew's birthday party, and my sister's graduation ceremony, all for the good of the team. And they'd repaid me by throwing me under the bus so smoothly I almost admired the coordination it must have taken. The Brennan project failure hadn't been my fault. I had the emails to prove it, the meeting notes, the decision trees I'd outlined showing exactly why their chosen approach would fail. But when the client pulled their contract and corporate came looking for heads to roll, suddenly my warnings became insufficient communication, and my documented concerns became failure to clearly escalate critical issues. Sarah had been in those meetings. She'd seen my presentations, but when the investigation committee asked her about it, she'd shrugged and said she couldn't recall the specifics. Tom had been even more creative, suggesting that I'd been difficult to work with lately and might have been overwhelmed by the scope of the project. Janet had delivered the killing blow with surgical precision. "Marcus is talented, but he may have reached the limits of what he can handle at this level." Derek had nodded sagely through it all, playing the concerned manager who was disappointed but not entirely surprised by my performance issues. He'd even had the audacity to frame the transfer as looking out for my best interests, a chance to reset and rebuild my reputation at a different location. The beautiful part was how they'd managed to make it look like company policy rather than a coordinated character assassination. Marcus Sullivan wasn't being fired or demoted. He was being laterally transferred to maximize resource allocation across branches. The Phoenix office needed someone with my skill set. It was a perfect match. Everyone wins, except I was the only one who seemed to understand that Phoenix wasn't a lateral move. It was corporate Siberia, The branch office that handled the accounts no one else wanted, staffed with the people no one else could work with. A place where careers went to die quietly, away from the main stage. Speech! Speech! Someone called out, and the crowd picked up the chant. They wanted me to say something memorable, something they could feel good about. A gracious goodbye that would let them tell themselves they were good people who'd treated a colleague fairly. I looked around the room at their expectant faces, these people who'd shared lunches with me, who'd come to my birthday parties, who'd seemed to genuinely like me right up until the moment it became inconvenient. They had no idea what I knew. No idea what I'd spent the last 2 weeks preparing. Well, I said, moving to the center of the room as conversations quieted down. I have to say, this is exactly the send-off I expected. A few people chuckled, taking it as self-deprecating humor about the low-budget decorations. When I first heard about the transfer, I was surprised, I continued, my voice carrying easily through the small room. I mean, here I thought I was doing good work, contributing to the team, helping us succeed, but clearly I was wrong about something. Derek's smile flickered slightly. Something in my tone wasn't matching the script they'd expected. I spent a lot of time these past 2 weeks reflecting on what went wrong with the Brennan project. Really digging into the details, trying to understand how I could have done better. I paused, letting the weight of the moment build. And you know what I discovered? I didn't fail at all. You did. The room went quiet. Sarah stopped mid-sip of her punch. Tom's story died on his lips. See, the thing about documentation is that it doesn't lie. Emails don't forget what was said in meetings. Calendar invites don't misremember who was supposed to do what. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila folder. And corporate policies don't change just because it's convenient. Derek stepped forward, his manager instincts kicking in. Marcus, maybe we should what? Should have this conversation privately, like we should have had 6 months ago? I shook my head. No, Derek. I think the team deserves to hear this. After all, they're the ones who helped make it possible. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. This is the email I sent on March 15th, outlining exactly why the Brennan approach would fail and recommending an alternative strategy. It was sent to Derek, Janet, Tom, and Sarah. I looked at each of them in turn. Sarah, you replied, "Sounds complicated." Tom, you said we should stick with the original plan for consistency. Janet, you said my concerns were noted but not actionable at this stage. And Derek, you told me to focus on execution rather than second-guessing decisions that had already been made. The silence in the room was deafening. Someone's phone buzzed, startlingly loud in the quiet. This next one is from March 28th, I continued, pulling out another email. My follow-up when the first phase metrics came in exactly as I'd predicted they would. I specifically said that we were heading for a cliff and needed to change course immediately. Janet, your response was that we were too committed to pivot now. Derek, you said that minor adjustments could be made in phase 2. I could see realization dawning on their faces. The understanding that I hadn't just been documenting my work, I'd been building a case. April 12th. The client expressing concerns that matched my warnings exactly. I forwarded their email to the team with a note saying, "This is our last chance to fix this." No one responded. Not one of you. Tom cleared his throat. Marcus, look, we all made mistakes. No, Tom. You all made choices. Calculated choices to ignore someone who was trying to save your asses because it was easier to hope I was wrong than to admit the plan was flawed. I pulled out more documents. Meeting notes where I'm listed as present but my objections aren't recorded. Email chains where my warnings are deleted before being forwarded to upper management. A performance review where Derek wrote that I was resistant to feedback and struggled with team collaboration. Derek's face had gone pale. Where did you get that performance review? That's confidential. I got it the same place I got copies of all the emails you sent to corporate about me. The ones where you discussed my attitude problems and declining performance weeks before the Brennan project even failed. I smiled, and it felt cold on my face. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I'd just quietly disappear to Phoenix and never wonder why my access to certain systems was restricted? Why I was suddenly excluded from planning meetings? Why my project assignments were reduced? The room had emptied of celebration. People were looking at the floor, at their phones, anywhere but at me. The party atmosphere had curdled into something ugly and uncomfortable. The beautiful thing about corporate bureaucracy, I continued, is how much paper it generates. And the beautiful thing about having friends in IT is how much of that paper they can help you access when they think you're getting railroaded. Sarah spoke up, her voice small. Marcus, you didn't mean to get caught. I put the documents back in the folder. You didn't mean for me to figure out that this was planned. You thought you were so clever, managing me out quietly. No fuss, no drama, just a gradual erosion of my position until the transfer became the obvious solution. That's not how it happened, Janet protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Let's see. I started counting on my fingers. First, my project load gets reduced because I'm overwhelmed. Then my meeting invitations start getting overlooked because of scheduling conflicts. My suggestions get dismissed because I'm being defensive or difficult. My performance review gets written by Derek without my input because there was a miscommunication about the deadlines. And finally, when the Brennan project fails exactly as I predicted it would, suddenly it's all my fault because I didn't communicate effectively or escalate appropriately. Derek tried one more time to regain control. Marcus, you're obviously upset, and I understand that, but this isn't the time or place. When would be the right time, Derek? When I'm safely in Phoenix and can't cause any problems for you? When the story has been scrubbed clean and everyone can remember it the way you want them to? I laughed, and the sound was harsh in the quiet room. No, I think this is exactly the right time and place. These people helped you destroy my reputation. They deserve to hear what comes next. What comes next? Tom asked, and I could hear the fear in his voice. Well, that depends on how you want to play this. I tucked the folder under my arm. See, I've got two choices here. Option 1. I take my transfer to Phoenix quietly, like a good little soldier. I disappear into the corporate wilderness, and you all get to tell yourselves you did what was necessary for the good of the team. Everyone moves on, nobody talks about it, and life goes on. I let that hang in the air for a moment before continuing. Option 2. I don't go to Phoenix. I go to the Labor Relations Board with a formal complaint about workplace harassment and retaliation. I go to corporate with copies of every email, every document, every piece of evidence showing how this department systematically isolated and undermined an employee to force them out. I go to the press with a story about how a major corporation allows middle management to destroy careers to cover up their own failures. The room was dead silent. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant sound of traffic from the street below. You see, the thing about being transferred to Phoenix is that it's not actually happening until Monday. Today is Friday. I've got a whole weekend to decide which option I prefer. I smiled at their stricken faces. The funny thing is, I was actually planning to go quietly. Right up until I walked in here and saw how happy you all were to see me go, how relieved you looked, how much you were enjoying this little celebration. Sarah was crying now, silent tears running down her cheeks. Tom looked like he might throw up. Janet was staring at me with something approaching horror, finally understanding that the quiet, reliable team player they thought they knew had been documenting everything, preparing for exactly this moment. But you know what really decided it for me? I looked directly at Derek. It was realizing that you threw me that party not because you felt bad about what you were doing, but because you wanted to feel good about it. You wanted to send me off with smiles and cake so you could tell yourselves you were decent people. So you could remember this as a friendly farewell instead of what it actually was. I started toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Oh, and just so we're all clear about where I'm being transferred to, I'm not going to Phoenix. I never was. The Phoenix transfer was Derek's idea, his solution to the problem I represented. But corporate never actually approved it. They thought they were just moving some files around, reassigning some accounts. They had no idea Derek was using their bureaucracy to exile someone who'd been trying to save them millions of dollars. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's not. The paperwork was all approved. The paperwork was approved for a standard resource reallocation. Nobody told corporate why you really wanted me gone. Nobody mentioned the Brennan project or the performance issues or any of the justification you've been building. It was just Derek recommending a transfer for operational efficiency. I smiled. Which means, when I walk into the CEO's office on Monday morning with this folder and ask why they're rewarding the person who tried to prevent a major contract loss by exiling them to Siberia, they're going to have some very interesting questions for you. The party favors seemed obscene now, the balloons too bright, the banner too cheerful, the cake sitting forgotten on the break room table. Everything about the celebration felt grotesque in light of what they now understood. You could have just let me go quietly, I said to the room in general. You could have felt a little guilty about it, like normal people would. But instead, you threw a party. You celebrated, getting rid of me. You made it into a joke. I headed for the door again, then paused one final time. The really ironic thing? I actually was planning to take the Phoenix transfer. I was going to leave quietly, start over, let all of this go. But walking in here and seeing how genuinely happy you were to see me leave, that changed my mind. Because if you're going to celebrate my departure, you might as well have something worth celebrating. I left them standing in their pathetic party debris, surrounded by the remains of their premature victory celebration. The banner still hung crooked above the door, but now it looked less like a farewell and more like evidence. Monday morning, I was in the CEO's office by 8 a.m. with my folder of evidence and a detailed timeline of everything that had happened. By noon, Derek was in meetings with HR and legal. By end of business, an internal investigation had been opened into departmental management practices and employee treatment. I never did make it to Phoenix. Instead, I was offered Derek's position when he was quietly reassigned to a consulting role in the company's satellite office, their version of Siberia. The Brennan account was restored when I contacted them directly and explained what had actually happened during their project. They were so impressed with my integrity that they signed an even larger contract for the following year. Sarah transferred to another department, unable to meet my eyes during the handoff meetings. Tom found a job at a different company, citing new opportunities that everyone knew meant he'd been encouraged to leave. Janet stayed, but in a reduced role, her authority quietly curtailed. The party decorations stayed up for weeks afterward. Every time someone walked past the break room, they were reminded of the celebration that had backfired so spectacularly. It became a cautionary tale told in whispers around the office water cooler. Be careful who you celebrate getting rid of, because they might not be gone yet. 6 months later, the department was running more efficiently than it had in years. The Brennan project approach I'd originally recommended became the new standard for similar contracts, saving the company millions and earning several industry awards. My team, My new team trusted me completely, having seen what happened to people who didn't. I never threw a goodbye party for Derek when he left. Professional courtesy seemed more appropriate than celebration, but I did send him a card on his last day. Just a simple note wishing him well in his new position and thanking him for teaching me so much about leadership. I didn't mention which lessons those had been. I figured he was smart enough to figure that out for himself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about letting them destroy themselves while you document everything and wait for the right moment to present the evidence. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear quietly when people expect you to. And sometimes the best revenge is realizing that their celebration of your departure was premature and making sure they understand exactly how premature it was. The goodbye party they threw for me became the beginning of their own goodbyes. They'd celebrated my exit before checking whether I was actually gone. In their eagerness to feel good about what they'd done, they'd revealed exactly what they'd done. They threw a party to celebrate my departure, but they never bothered to find out where I was really going. That was their first mistake. And thanks to my documentation, it was their last.